Welcome to the Supply Chainiacs. I'm your host, Glenn Kepke, and with me today we have a special guest, Chris Stauber. Chris, it's good to see you again. Welcome to the Supply Chainiacs. How are you doing?
Hey, thank you, Glenn. I'm doing well, thanks. It's great to be here and my first opportunity to be with the Supply Chainiacs.
Yeah, welcome to the superstar show of industry experts. So today's topic is around document visibility within the international landscape, and our goal is to really understand for shippers and beneficial cargo owners that are out there in the global landscape. Why does document management and document visibility matter? What are the implications to it? And what are the leading supply chains doing today to invest in driving their operation forward? So hoping you could just spend a quick minute on explaining your background, what's led you to become a ocean industry expert, and how you've come to FourKites.
All right, cool, thank you. One of the funny things, I've been building and delivering software products for probably close to 40 years now. I started my career in the ERP market segment and built a number of systems, probably about 14, 15 years doing that. I was in the CRM market with Siebel, and we kind of helped create that market. And that was really about connecting customers and sales and marketing all together in a way to optimize opportunity management. And then I got into supply chain, and I've been working that for probably about 7 years or so. And again, what I've seen is some consistent patterns, and that is these are now networks, and people talk about supply chain, but it's really not a chain, right? It's a network, it's an ecosystem. There's lots of members involved, and it's complex. And so, I thank you for calling me an expert, but 7 years just makes me, just slightly able to talk about it. But here's the thing: is we look at visibility, we look at one segment of that, and it's documentation. And if we're talking about international shipments from customers that are shipping goods from all over the world to other places all over the world, there's a lot of requirements that come about from that. And these requirements come from regulatory sources, like the country's legal regulations. They come from the customers that you're selling to, and they come from the suppliers that you're buying from. And what happens is that you take the government, you take the customers, oh yeah, and there's safety requirements that you got to worry about too. You take all these things in conjunction, and what happens is it becomes very difficult to answer 3 basic questions that every ocean international transportation shipment needs to answer. And that is, what documents are required? Who's responsible for supplying, reviewing, and approving those documents? And then when are they due? And what's interesting about this is that last question is almost a trick question, because some documents you actually need to have before you can begin a shipment. And one in particular, if you're importing into the US, of course, is you got to have an ISF, and it needs to be filed 24 hours before the vessel departure. So if you don't have that document ready, then guess what? Your container doesn't make it on board the vessel. And then there's a whole slew of documents that need to be available at the tail end of the process at the port of discharge. And again, if you don't have those documents there, then what ends up happening is you end up with your container getting stuck in customs, and your customers aren't going to be happy. You're going to miss potential, intermodal transfers, and all kinds of bad things accrue.
That makes sense. I think, obviously what's interesting is, a lot of our listeners are historically focused on track and trace, which is where's my truck, where's my container. But, the ISF that you mentioned, right? Historically, in logistics, at least in road transport, we always think of, once the load is staged or the truck is picked up, we often don't think about it days in advance, right? Unless you're shipping across international borders in EMEA, Africa, APAC, potentially, LATAM and North America. But in this case, clearly the extensibility of documents is key. What's the main driver behind why I need visibility? So it sounds like there's a lot of unique situations. One of the things you called out is containers being stuck, right? Which obviously will drive delays. Are there other factors of why document visibility is so important?
Absolutely. One of the things that we find is that customers that are moving a lot of goods will run into issues with detention and demurrage, and these can be substantial, like in the millions of dollars. Now, that doesn't mean document visibility can cure all of that, because if your essential problem is you don't have warehouse space, then having more documents on time doesn't help you. But when you're stuck at port because you don't have the right customs documents, or the other real monetary value that happens is if the shipment is actually being financed, then there's another issue that arises with this document. It's not just being there, but also being correct. And if there's a letter of credit involved, then the banks often get very, very specific about things, like USA is not the same as U.S.A. And you really end up with these problems. One of our customers and prospects actually is looking at millions of dollars in rejected shipments because of a 2-letter change in a word from in to on, and that was just it was a huge problem from them. And I think what makes the challenge tougher is if you don't have a system in place, then you're now relegated to email and Google Sheets or Excel spreadsheets. One of our customers that's really getting a lot of value out of this system has about a 25,000 line spreadsheet, and in it details each of the kinds of documents that's needed for each customer, each kind of shipment or commodity that they're making, and the country of origin and country of destination. And we replaced that 25,000 line spreadsheet with a set of configurable business rules that allow them to easily change this stuff as things change, right? So one of the things that's kind of funny about this is that it's not just the regulatory of is it hazardous or not, and then what's the material data safety sheet, or the regulatory of customs that demands certain kinds of documentation. But now to satisfy customers, if you're shipping food products, you might need to have a certificate that it's not GMO, or that it's halal or kosher or some other thing. And these are the kinds of things that when they're not there, your customers are unhappy. And so we want to be able to make sure that everybody has that and that can collaborate on it. So part of this document visibility really includes a system of creating the tasks that are necessary to the assigned individuals that are going to be supplying those documents, and then a centralized repository so that all this stuff can be in there in one place. And one key thing about it is that if you're using email to do this otherwise, then what ends up happening is, like, I don't know about your email box, but mine is really full. And it's really hard to keep up with all the different emails. And therefore, you run the risk of not looking at the right version when you have a particular document you're supposed to review and approve. When you're using the document visibility system that we provide, you always see the latest and greatest and the commentary that the other people in the ecosystem have put in. And so whether you have the right document or not, whether it's correct. And so this is really where we see people reducing the inefficiencies of email and spreadsheets, making it so that it's much more automated, and then bringing that ecosystem together. And then you get improved efficiencies as well as reduced fees and detention and demurrage costs that could otherwise accrue. And oh, by the way, did we mention happy customers? we kind of like that. Yeah, there's even an acronym that one of our customers created. Everyone's pretty familiar with on time in full, or OTIF as it's often called. And they created this acronym for the documentation visibility they called DOTIF, for documents on time in full. And again, this was really all to get around the fact that some are being created by suppliers, some by customs brokers, other parties in the ecosystem. And then one of the things that we did is we created a system where they can put reasons in for why things are late or why they were missing, because if you measure it, you can improve it. And so there's a little set of analytics around all that.
That's great. Yeah, I think some highlights that you've mentioned. So the document visibility portal is a huge value add to these complex networks. And I think the changing the definition from supply chain to network of networks is a great analogy, right, of how international transport works and just how many different parties are involved. And so in my previous life, just having been involved in ocean transportation from a shipper side, seeing the complexities firsthand, right? The importation, the exportation of goods, what you've called out is super exciting to see and great to hear the customer sentiment on impacting revenue, on margin, on customer satisfaction, and then love the new acronym of DOTIF, right? I'm a big acronym guy, so exciting to hear that being mentioned by one of your customers. So thank you, Chris, for joining us on Supply Chainiacs. That wraps up our two-part series on international visibility, and appreciate your feedback on how document management and document visibility is changing how supply chains operate. So take care, everyone, and stay safe, and we'll see you on a future episode of Supply Chainiacs.